Hi, everyone. Welcome. So happy you're here with us today. My name is Carolyn Jones. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the program director at Grid 110, and also I'm a coach. And so we're so excited to have you today. But before we jump into it, I want you to meet these amazing speakers on the call today. And so let's go ahead and just jump into it. First, though, I would love for you to know the session. Why are you here? What does self care mean? Why are we here today? So, self care has emerged as a major topic for companies of varying sizes and stages. Founders who have integrated self care practices into their life have reported experiencing more productivity, teamwork, and innovation. So, today we are going to share tips on how you can incorporate personal self care practices and an impact that self-care as a business strategy can have on organizations. But before we jump into that discussion, I want you to meet these panelists. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Nicola. Can you go ahead and kick us off?
Absolutely. It is an honor to be here today. Thanks so much for hosting the conversation. We're going to talk about not a dull subject, wellness, and the importance of self-care, as we've heard. I am the founding executive director of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. I started out my career as an immigrant entrepreneur, coming over stateside when I was young from my dad, and then doing it myself a few times. I then went over and spent a little bit of time in venture. Decade. It's hard to believe it went that fast. And now I'm really honored to be the founding CEO and executive director of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. We're a nonprofit with a mission of really focusing and prioritizing on the sustainability of our founders. And that first starts with really building self-care into them and making sure that they can go the marathon that is the journey of entrepreneurship. So more to come on that soon.
Great. Thanks, Nicola. And Sid, what about you? Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Sid Fleischer. I have had a coaching and consulting practice specializing in people ops, helping startups through change management, growth phases, all the things and more that come with building an organization from scratch, and what that means when you have employees who are people who have needs, and how to make everything work and get to alignment with your business goals, with your personal values, with the company values. And I started my career in tech in San Francisco, a venture-backed startup that was a Facebook app, so that dates me a bit. And have held almost every job there is that doesn't ship code within an organization. And it's just lovely to be here, lovely to be with this great panel, and to be able to talk about something that is really important to me.
Great. Thanks, Sid. So happy to have you here, Nicola. We also have one more guest, Fabio, but he will be on shortly, and we'll be sure to introduce him at that time. So panelists, before we begin, I think it's important that we define self-care, right? According to Webster, the definition of self-care is care for oneself. Another definition I saw while researching this word online is self-care is the act of attending to one's physical or mental health. But regardless, I think it's important that we acknowledge that oftentimes in practice, self-care is a very personal practice. What self-care means to me might look completely different to you. So that being said, let's jump in. What does self-care mean to you?
Well, I'm happy to start, and I'll take it a little bit from it's always a work in practice. So let's start by knowing you never get it perfect, you never get it right, and that is absolutely okay. It's the intention of always trying to show up. And I think, especially, I'll take it from sort of the founder entrepreneur level for a moment. It's really hard to do. We spend so much time thinking about the care of others, thinking about the care of customers, thinking about the care of our team first and foremost, the care of investors, the care of outside stakeholders. And we forget, or we seem to hold up a popular mythology perhaps, that if we take that time to prioritize our self-care, then we're letting others down. And that's an interesting dynamic. We actually did original research over 8 years before our community of 70,000 had even joined us. And we asked them questions to try to understand, what is actually need it to be the most effective founder that you can be in the world. And there's actually quite a lot of lit out there, but it's not necessarily the popular ones that you look at. You have to have 3 healthy meals a day. You have to get at least 6.5 hours of sleep every night. You have to step away and have an hour of headspace. You have to put your oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on others. And I think in all of those scenarios, that's not necessarily the one that we hold up as like, yeah, folklore predicts if I'm not going 24/7, 365, then I'm not doing my job. But the reality is we can't do our job if we don't actually change that dynamic, if we don't actually change the algorithm so that self-care starts with us. So I'll say it can come in a lot of different flavors. It must take care of body, it must take care of mind, and it must take care of realizing you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. And that's okay. Just keep trying.
I just love that. I know when we were talking one-on-one before, you mentioned that oxygen mask. Can you say that again for the people in the back? I just think it's so important to remember that. What a great visual.
Yeah.
Say it one more time for us.
The team uses it so much because it is that visual connection.
Yes.
You have to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help others. We can't ask team members to prioritize their self-care if we are not doing that ourselves. We don't have the energy to support them in the ways that we need to as a leader if we don't first start with self before expecting others to jump on that boat with us.
Thank you. I thank you so much for that. Is putting it into practice, right? Is being a role model. How often do you tell others, like, hey, go outside, take a break? But do you practice it yourself? So just thank you for that. Just it starts with us. What about you, Sid? And then Fabio, I'd love for you to introduce yourself after that. But
Yeah.
Sid, what does self-care mean to you?
Yeah, I have really loved thinking about this question because it's such a buzzword. It's around, people associate it with like, it means meditation, it means this, it means that. But for me, what I've been thinking about is that self-care really starts with self-knowledge and being able to check in with ourselves and understand what we need, like understand what's my energy level, what's happening in my body, where am I feeling energized, where am I feeling depleted, and being able to build that knowledge base, being able to build some tools around checking in, around understanding our own feelings and needs and energy is so important to then be able to go out and ask for what you need or reprioritize things or set boundaries. And I think really, like, as I've been thinking about the self-knowledge around like, where is my energy and what do I need to say no to so that I can say yes to something else is in my life kind of the essence of self-care.
Yes. Thank you, Sid. Just the energy regulation, right? Self-knowledge. Words are important. And first of all, we have to know what the word is. How do you ask for help if you don't even know how to conceptualize it yet? Thank you. Ooh, Fabio, so good to see you. And thank you so much for joining this conversation. Yeah, of course. Well, before we jump in though, Fabio, do you mind introducing yourself to our guests?
Yes, of course. Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm Fabio. I am a business coach, and I work most of my clients are entrepreneurs or startups. They want to scale up and they don't know how to do it. And I am as well a speaker. I talk about diversity, inclusivity, and innovation. And it's a pleasure to be here today because self-care is really important for me. And I talk as well about that with my clients. No. If you want, I can talk about what does it mean for me self-care.
Yeah, you know something, Fabio? I'd love for you to like kick us off, right?
Yeah, let's kick off.
Just
Yeah,
been
I'm ready for
defining self-care, but like, what would you say? What are easy and practical ways that founders can begin to integrate self-care into their life?
I had to learn on myself self-care because for years I didn't know the meaning of a word. The word. Sometimes we heard these kind of words, but we don't really pay attention to these words. So for me, one of the most important things that I had to learn is to say no. For example, to some projects. At the time before, I want to be really open with you tonight. 7 years ago, I had the burnout, and because I was saying yes to all projects that I want to do it, and sometimes because I was thinking more is better, and it's not true. And when I start learning to say no to some project, to choose the right project for me, and to take care of myself in 3 different aspects. And they're still work in progress in an emotional way, in a spiritual way, I would say, and as well in a practical way. And as a founder, what would I say every day when I wake up in the morning? I do meditation, but if you don't practice meditation, think about one positive thing you did the last day, and I know that your day will start with a smile, and but think always. Because as a human beings, we like to think negatively, then positively. So try to think about one positive thing.
Yes. Thank you, Fabio. It's so important. I love what you just said too, though. Sometimes we don't know the words, but we know how it feels. So even with your own experience, you got to experience burnout to be able to call it, hey, this doesn't feel right. Oh, I think I'm experiencing burnout. And then learning that experience. And it's like, what do you do next? Do it's meditation. It can be a gratitude practice. It's setting boundaries. Yes. So, well, Nicola, Sid, what about you? How would you recommend integrating self-care?
I think it's the first thing that gets lost in the daily pressure of the 120 things on the to-do list. So, like, super practical hacks is actually getting it on the calendar. I know that sounds silly, and I know it's going to move, and all of those things are okay. But if you don't even put it on, make it on the calendar, it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen for lack of desirability. If anything, it feels like at the end of the day, it's just one other thing I didn't get to do today, or it's just one other thing I failed at. And that feels like, you're not operating in that abundance mindset that we all want to be in. It becomes just a depletive experience. Along those lines, I also would say it's really important that you share, that you have an accountability buddy. It doesn't really matter. They're not there to be like, you didn't do it today. It's not like that kind of sergeant style. But if you don't have a chance to really connect with a near peer or a champion that can help you feel good about prioritizing that, it's really easy to let it go. So the practice of sharing and the practice of prioritizing, you're role modeling again to others that it's okay. In fact, it's more than okay that you're doing this. It is not like I am less than, I am taking time out of actually doing the work. This is the work. But just like everything else, it's got to have a time and a place and a space that others can reflect and share and see how much it matters to you and respect that. And that goes back to, some of the great intel that Sid and Fabio have also shared on, like, boundaries are boundaries only within ourselves unless we share them with others. So people have to be able to experience those boundaries and see that and then pattern match against that too.
That I've heard, I don't know if you've all heard this before, but I've heard boundaries is a form of love. You share your boundaries with others who you hopefully respect or love because you're teaching them how to interact or communicate with you. And so I just love that. What about you, Sid? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I want to reiterate about the boundaries and the expectation setting, right? So there's setting the expectation with myself, putting something on the calendar, checking in and understanding what I want that practice to look like, or what are some things that do give me energy, do make me feel like myself, make me feel like my best self, really like bring that to the fore. And once I have those, then it's about setting expectations outside of myself. So making sure that the people who I'm beholden to, who I'm working with, who I'm living with, partnered with, all the things, understand that this is sort of sacred space for me, and this is something that will make me better, and in turn make all of them better. So I talk about expectation setting all day, every day, in terms of like a management practice, and it's just no different here, I think.
Thank you. I mean, this is just great, right? I think it just shows the diverse of what self-care can look like in practice. Right? Mention expectation setting, intentional practice, right? It needs to be intentional. Maybe you need to actually calendar it in so you don't forget about it. Accountability. Do you have a champion you can talk to and be honest about this conversation? Boundaries. What does that even mean? What does that even look like to you? Saying no. Thank you, Fabio, right? You say yes so many other times until it ran you straight into burnout. So then you had to unlearn that and learn how to say no, and a balance of the yeses and the nos. So I think it's just important to understand, it sounds like with all of you, that self-care can grow and it can change over time. And we need to show ourselves grace and compassion as this thing changes. It's a cultivation, if you will, a practice. So, earlier I mentioned founders who have integrated self-care practices into their life have reported higher levels of innovation, productivity, teamwork. Why do you think this is? Is this trend here to stay, or why do you think that is?
I think I go. I think we are in a moment. We all know that it is the moment of we say this is the new normality. Because we are after COVID, we have this experience that we don't know what will happen in the future. So the companies have to know to cultivate self-care for their employees. And as a founder as well, I think it's really important that when you want to become, want to be a founder, you have to have in your mind how to take care of your employee in a different way. You have to think of so many different aspects. 3 years ago, we didn't think about that.
Thank you. Ben, Nicola, what do you think? Is this here to stay?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I hope so. I think we're just sort of scratching the surface in terms of understanding what it means. Obviously, we're here trying to define it ourselves. So what does it mean? What does it mean for us as individuals? What does it mean for us as organizations in terms of how we set our priorities, how we set our expectations, how we set goals and targets, and how do we build in healthy models for the people who work here. And I mean, I just think it's here to stay because people who feel cared for, people who feel energized, people who feel like their needs are important and being met, work better, work harder, do better. And I think, there's the business case for it.
I see. Well, even a business, I know we've had conversations about that, right? Like somatic, that we're all just humans in a body.
Yeah.
What does that, what does that mean? If I'm a business manager, I'm like, okay, that sounds good and everything, but like, if I'm a people manager, what should I be paying attention to?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it back to the body, Carolyn. I mean, we are humans in bodies, and we're that when we're at work, we're that when we're outside of work. And in terms of people management, as you were saying, right, the people who we are working with, who we're building a team with, who we're trying to coach and motivate to perform are also humans in bodies. And that means they have nervous systems. And that means that sometimes their nervous systems are aligned and firing properly and giving them the kind of energy that they need to do good work. And sometimes they're out of alignment. So as a manager, for anyone who is interested in getting the best out of people, I do think it's helpful and important to build your own understanding of how does the nervous system work? What are some practices for grounding and centering and realigning? What are like different breath practices that are really simple and easy to learn? There's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 noticing practice that's also simple and easy to learn. And so what's my own understanding of myself? And when I feel aligned, I think like self-care starts with ourselves. And then this is the oxygen mask, which I also really love and appreciate. So how do I know when I'm well so that I can then offer that to others? And yeah, just in terms of like management, team building, check-ins, we have one-on-ones, we have team calls, team meetings. What are we building into those to address the just human in a bodiness of the people on our teams?
I love that. I mean, it touches on even what Nicola was saying earlier, right? She was saying self-care starts with you.
Right.
So what I'm even hearing, even from what you just shared, okay, building self-care into the business model, first is a individual practice. And hopefully from doing the individual practices, it teaches you how to reset, how to ground, why it's helpful for yourself. And then taking that knowledge and then building it into the business model, whether it's from what you just said, knowing and understanding the body, doing breath work, recommending meditation, recommending your colleagues to go outside, understanding there's different communication styles. That's really great to see from the individual level, but also from that bigger level. What about you, Nicola? What do you think?
Yeah, it's so good. I was mindful, no pun intended, as this conversation was unfolding, but we've spent, early chapters, if you'll indulge, around this topic that started out with expecting, well, no, you can achieve this thing called work-life balance. And I think we've all kind of had so many rolling of the eyes going, there's no such thing. I mean, it's like the myth unicorn. In fact, at least unicorns probably had more root in why they existed rather than this craziness that's work-life balance. And so then it was integration, but integration through culture, and culture became about perks, and culture became about these tangible things that everyone aspired to get a hold of and the cost of the dollars of them. And instead, finally, we're at a moment in time where we realize through the very real humanity that we've all experienced, the loss of lives, the fear of war, the challenging, dynamic world that has been moving at rapid pace over the last 2.5 years, that when it all comes down to it, it's the fact that we only have so many days on this planet to be able to connect meaningfully and intentionally with one another. Where we spend our hours matters. Our choices of how we connect with others matters. And my zone of genius is not going to be the same as another's as far as what those hours mash up to, but we can all slow down to understand one another a little bit differently and apply some of these incredible practices that Sid and Fabio have already talked through and shared. And when we enter into all spaces, our work most emphatically a critical part of that, with that intention, it starts by embracing self-care into the enterprise, not as an adjunct, not as a nice to have, not as something that gets cut from the balance sheet, but because no business can survive, thrive, or let alone flourish if we don't prioritize the humans that are behind that business in the first place.
Oof, Nicola. Right. What I'm hearing is the heartbeat behind the company. It's tending to that heart, right? All these companies have a heartbeat and heartbeats that make this company run. So how do we tend to it? Yes. Well, something you've said in the past too, I think it's also making sure that we give people permission to get it wrong. I know when we were talking before, especially with all the different founders you have worked with, is what self-care looks like for companies from 0 to 20 can look totally different from self-care with 20 to 200.
It's true. It's so
What do you say with that for a founder who's going through these multiple transitions?
Again, I think as much as you can, surrounding yourself with near peers who are walking that walk with you will go a long way, because it can feel so intimidating and it can feel like you're messing up and not getting it right. And again, it's not about being the perfectionist, though a lot of times founders do organically have that as part of wanting to not let their team down, most especially. But I think it's also realizing that we as ourselves go through transitions and changes very differently as our companies grow and as the world grows around us too. One of the elements that is super important in thinking through that is the different priorities and permissions and challenges that live with your shareholders, and shareholders broadly speaking. So again, sometimes founders feel this has to be kept as inner speak, right? This is something that we talk about inside of staff meetings or on one-on-ones because it matters that much. But I'm going to be here to say, from all the founders that we've worked with, all of the incredible diverse talent out there, where things get lost in translation is when it's not moving up chain and around chain. And what I mean by that is, if your investors have a different perspective or haven't been given permission to see how important this is to you and how it is integrated throughout the entire environment of your culture, your talent development, it is going to be hard for them to support you when it comes to decisions that are made in the boardroom, or when it comes to decisions as to which investor we work with or don't, or which financial products we flock to or don't. It is not in isolation that self-care happens. It can't be. It has to literally be a horizontal approach in order for it to actually work.
Thank you. Totally. I mean, that completely makes sense, right? It's some of these things, I think it makes sense intellectually, and it's just a matter of like now going out there and practicing it. Fabio, earlier you mentioned anxiety and being nice to yourself, and you mentioned self-knowledge, this really interesting thing, right? What do you think? What do you think about anxiety? I know you have coached individuals and you've seen a lot of ticks up in anxiety, especially with how this current climate has gone for the past few years. What would you
Yeah,
say?
we know. All the statistics, they talk really well about that. The high anxiety the people have. Generally, we can see that, by the way. So, and you can imagine when we talk about self-care, especially, we have to talk about in a deep way, especially when I talk about anxiety. It's one of the most common things happen to us. Sometimes anxiety can be positive, but for example, when you have to do a performance, it can be really good, but can be really bad for another aspect. So one of the best practices that you will say, oh, Fabio, you discovered the water, but it's not that, is when we breathing. So each one of us should learn how to breathe, because breathing is the concept, is the base of in the way we do the time. Imagine 5 years ago when I started talking, especially in English, I was so anxious about my accent. I used to run more than now my words. So I had to learn to breathe, to be in the moment. And that most of you have. I don't know if you have read the book called The Power of Now of Eckhart Tolle. And it's really an amazing book that he talks about how it's important to live the moment. And sometimes we forget that, because as I told you before, 7 years ago, the Fabio was more about, I want to go, I want to do, everything was a yes. I want to go in the place where I used to organize in many parties contemporaneously. It was too much. But now I've learned the importance of breathing, and as well. When we talk about anxiety, I always say that when you live a moment, write the scenario that you are living and ask to yourself if that moment is real. Because sometimes the moment that we are living and anxiety we give to ourselves are not real, are made of our mind. Our mind is amazing to make a movie. Oh my God, we are the best movie maker ever, because we can make this kind of movie. But then if you start writing, I always with my clients say, is that real? Let's analyze that. And when we talk, my client, they look at me and say, oh my gosh, it's not really, because and another question really well that I'm going to suggest it to all of you: where is the evidence? getting the evidence of their thought.
I hear you.
Yeah. Can I just jump in, Carolyn?
Yeah, please say.
I love that. Where's the evidence? Something I ask is, how do you know? All the time, right? So someone's, in a state of anxiety about something and say, this is true, then just like, how do you know is a nice reset for folks to get thinking about, oh, right, where is the evidence? But then I also want to just talk about like how companies get this wrong too, and some of the pitfalls when folks try to introduce self-care into their organizations. And I think, one that is really important for me to put out there is to do it before or in lieu of some basic, solid HR practices. Like, do people feel safe at work? Do people feel psychologically safe? And do you have a work environment that is equitable enough, fair enough, inclusive enough to then be able to take it to the level of self-care, right? I think that something I've seen is folks jumping in too soon to, oh, we're gonna show people how to meditate or show people how to breathe or encourage you to put this time on your calendar for self-care, but they're not meeting people where they are in their own needs from the organization. And then, the other pitfall is just a one size fits all approach, right? As we've all talked about, self-care means different things to us. It looks different ways to us. So figuring out how to be inclusive of all the different kinds of people and all their different needs is challenging and really important.
I hear you. Sid, real quick, I'm hearing the word psychological safety a lot more recently. What does that even mean? Like, it sounds good. Psychological. Whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, I'll actually just bring it back to the body. For me, it means am I in a state of regulation more often than not? Okay. Or am I being dysregulated at work often? And if that's true, then that psychological safety, that feeling of just being able to show up and be present and not have something rolling in the background, either in your mind or unconsciously in your body, that is in a protection mode. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Nicola, Fabio, what about you? What are common pitfalls you've seen?
I love the one size doesn't fit all. I'm going to take that and just double down on something that you actually said a little earlier, Carolyn, but I think it often gets glossed over for all the best reasons. One size doesn't fit all as well when it comes to communications and strategies is how this gets adopted inside of companies. I had a company where I really messed this up and I was like, this is so great, and everyone individually had shared how great this was and it was so awesome. We're all going to be in it, and we started expecting everyone to be able to show up and sort of share in the same style, and it was very quickly apparent that everyone was on their own journey, obviously, as to how this was working for them, and it was not intended to be, but felt that some people were not able to perform as others were, or they had to sort of make it up to be able to go along with their peers. The worst outcome, right? That's definitely not what the whole point of this process is, but just a reflection that, again, it may be you have a great scenario where everyone can perform in group around sharing out how it's going or what they need or what they'd like, or group activities that maybe also not. And being able to prioritize and be present and slowing down to ask that question and watch and observe more often than put forward the ideas is a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance. And that feedback loop may be this quarter it worked this way, next quarter it's not. Because again, these are dynamic individuals that have dynamic situations at home and dynamic situations in their communities that are driving and changing, not to mention the dynamic world, that are changing how all of this works in flow or not. And so having KPIs, for lack of a better word, that everyone has to perform to is not the right equation to prioritize. Let's put it that way.
I appreciate that. And just for everyone on the call, KPIs is almost like goal setting. How do you reach that bigger goal? What are the lesser goals that take it, like the task? But that completely makes sense, right? It sounds like you're saying, there's not one solution for all. Sounds like you're saying not everyone has the same communication style. Sounds like obviously this can be tough to implement right away perfectly the first time. And so to give yourself grace as you figure it out, even understanding it could change quarter to quarter, or as you grow your company from the first few employees to the first 20 employees to the first 200 employees. It will likely look different in each growth period. But the importance is grace, understanding, observing, and feedback loops to tell you what do you need.
And flexibility and optionality. I mean, again, buzzy words I know in a general space, but one thing that we've seen that where it has worked well is, again, when it's almost more employee-led than employer-led, if you have that potential, meaning that it might be better to invite employees to really drive the outcomes that matter to them. And again, it works in earlier stages, perhaps in later stage enterprise side, but it's hard, right? You're making a buy decision. If we adopt a platform that prioritizes self-care, you might be signing a multi-year license to do that. Any of us that would have gone back 2+ years would probably have not necessarily selected the platform that we would today for the variety of reasons, including the ways in which we all work together very differently, and our teams have evolved, and our needs have evolved in society and in workplace most especially. So how do you bake in those options that matter and really make sure that it's employee driven rather than sort of fiscal and not forgetting the business side. Obviously, we're all in business to be in business too, and we can't do what we want for our employees if there isn't monies to support that. But at the end of the day, it's got to be dynamic enough that this world and this work and self-care can adapt as it needs to.
Makes sense. And thank you. It sounds like balance and putting people first. Where does that fall on that profitability, right? So we love to take questions from the audience actually at this time. And I see this great question already in a chat. It fits perfectly to this conversation. So what would be a KPI for measuring well-being? What would that look like? Guys, anyone?
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, like I've seen it done through qualitative and quantitative employee surveys, and having a KPI around like X percentage of, or X score on this question of how well do you feel at work, or how supported, or how much is self-care driven by the organization, something like that, where you're getting regular responses from people, so that there isn't like a recency bias or time bias, but you're constantly querying employees around how they're doing with this. How's the company doing with this? What can we do differently? What can we do better?
Right. Thank you, Sid. I have another question actually that just came through too, if we're able to go to that. What's the biggest myth about self-care that you want to bust? Ooh.
The biggest myth.
I think that it's like hard. Actually, I don't think it has to be hard. I think building a like relationship with yourself. Yeah, okay, that's hard. I've had a lot of therapy, but maybe I'm lying to you, but maybe not. Like, if you have that, then all it takes is like a sticky note on your computer that says check in, or like a beautiful photo or rock or something that's special to you on your desk that when you see it reminds you to just pause for a second or take some breaths. So once you get to a certain point, I really don't think it's hard.
Yeah, as she said, like during my holiday, I do remember we were talking about that. I stopped, no emails. Don't look emails, no Instagram, no all this kind of stuff that sometimes can be related to work. Stop everything, and I'm telling you, yourself, you will feel better, especially work email. No, I am holiday.
I love
Mm,
that.
Small, all about small steps.
small steps.
And that's exactly where I was going to go. That it's all or nothing. I mean, I'll be a bit personal for a moment. I got two little monkeys at home. They're 4 and 3. So let me tell you, before monkeys, I had a whole lot more luxury of time as far as like what those mornings were looking like. And now there are some mornings where I'm like, self-care was getting a cup of coffee this morning and getting 5 before I started the monkey regime. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And I love every second about it. But it's also, again, realizing that it ebbs and flows just like with everything. And that's okay, right? Because that's the whole point of life. If it was static, it would be boring. You wouldn't be entrepreneurs. You wouldn't be doing this. You wouldn't be as passionate around trying to get it right. But you also have to realize those small steps matter. The practice will continue to adhere to great muscle memory of why we do this. And even when we don't get it as perfect as we might want to, it's still being able to check in and realize others are watching that. We're cueing others in that moment. And most importantly, we're taking a moment to breathe. That discipline of even breathing before reacting. It's just so good. And it can make all the difference in the world. It really can.
I appreciate this. In fact, another question came in, and I feel like you just answered it. The question was, you talk about slowing down, but how do you do this in a fast-paced startup environment? And I think you just hit on that. What, one step at a time. Nicola, it can look like a cup of coffee on some days, right?
Sometimes checking in and going, yesterday was great. Here's the 3 things that I'm really grateful for. Here's the 3 things that I intend to be able to set my priorities to today. That can happen so quickly, but it's that ability to have that intention and not to be at the wind of others, without to own that time, to have that space. And they may not come true. That's okay. That's not what you're saying in that moment. What you're saying in that moment is, this is how I show up. And sometimes self-care is about how you show up more than it is the outcomes. I had one myth that I'll just share it because it's a funny one, because I was like, oh, if that works, that'll be great. If you self-care, then you don't get sick. Right? Like if you do this, you won't get sick. No, gnarly colds will still hit you. Flu buggies are still out there. You will fall down and get a broken leg. That's not what we're talking about. It isn't about the perfection or the pursuit of no more sick days. It is about realizing that, again, as humans, you can't go the distance if you're not taking time to stop and smell the roses or celebrate the wins along the way. And those wins sometimes are getting up each and every day going, well, it's a day. It's going to end with a DAY at the end of it, no matter what. And here's how I choose to show up in that day.
Thank you. I mean, this is great. We only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to be very mindful of the chat right here. And panelists, feel free to even write and answer in the chat if that works. But looking at Gina's question, what role do you believe well-being or self-care should play in an organization's strategic plans or goals? And keep in mind, we have 2 minutes left. So don't know if you have.
Okay, go. The future is fundamental for the organization, especially for the talent of the future, where they are going to be the statistics organization, how much they put effort on self-care. So it's going to be really, really important if they want to be innovative. If they don't want to be innovative, I'm sorry, in 50 years will not be anymore here. Because self-care is going to be crucial for them. With the new, the new applying something that people can think that organization is based on self-care in some activities. Okay.
All right. Yeah. What else do you think? I mean, even looking at Lynn's question, right? How do you teach self-care? Is there any way to combine this into the strategic plan of a business?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think they're perfectly aligned, right? Where if we have, as an organization, which if I had my druthers, everyone would, goals, metrics, KPIs, OKRs, acronyms around self-care, employee wellness, employee well-being, then we would be able to tie that to budget, tie that to specific programming, whether that's building capacity within the organization through outside engagement, through internal like learning and development pieces of the org that have that knowledge and can share it. it has to make sense for the organization at like the size, the stage, and the people who are there.
I understand.
100%.
Thank you so much. I know. Would you like to add one more thing?
I was just going to add, I mean, if you are a business or a service that has employees and your employees are critical and they are the must-have to the business, then it has to be part of the strategic board, and it has to be through management up to board level. It can't be any other place. It's as critical as your talent development plans. It is synonymous with talent development.
I love that. And that already shows the priority, right? When you make it just as synonymous with anything else, you know, self-care. That's a big statement right there. And that already should help build your culture. So thank you, everyone, so much. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share? Thank you so much, guests, for being here. Any final thoughts from the panelists?
Only gratitude and appreciation for learning from this incredible team, and for everyone joining. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for putting this together. It's been a wonderful practice for me too. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us during this conversation. We had a lot of fun, and thank you for just being so lively in a chat and you know, being part of this, an interactive experience for everyone. We hope you have fun. We hope to see you at the closing remarks of the summit. Thank you so much, Start Out, for putting the summit on. We greatly appreciate it. And Alex, shout out to you for doing the back end. Thank you so much for being our ops support. Thank you, everyone. Take care.